Everyone thought the contract would decide their future. But by the end, the only thing that mattered was what they chose sober. This is an original story. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental. The morning after Daniel left the gallery, and Claire nearly ruined Iris on the apartment wall out of jealousy and principle, the world should have felt unstable. It did. Just not in the way Iris expected. Because unstable, she was learning, did not always mean bad. Sometimes it meant waking up in a bed that still smelled faintly of expensive linen, Claire's perfume, and poor decisions that had somehow turned into very good memories. Sometimes it meant sunlight stretched across tangled sheets while Claire Donovan, infuriatingly composed even with sleep still softening her face, stood barefoot in the kitchen making coffee like she hadn't dismantled an ex-boyfriend and then kissed half the air out of Iris less than 12 hours ago. Iris came into the kitchen wearing one of Claire's shirts and absolutely no intention of being reasonable. Claire looked up from the espresso machine, then looked down, then back up. That tiny pause should have been illegal. Iris folded her arms. Don't. Claire's mouth curved. I haven't said anything. You're thinking very clearly. That sounds efficient, not criminal. It's both. Claire slid a mug toward her. Coffee. Iris took it and watched her over the rim. You look suspiciously rested. I slept well. Of course you did. Claire leaned lightly against the counter. You slept on my shoulder and stole most of the blanket. I was emotionally taxed. I noticed. Iris took another sip and narrowed her eyes. Also for the record, you are still not allowed to look pleased every time I appear wearing your clothes. Claire's gaze moved, slow and entirely unapologetic, over the oversized white shirt on Iris, then the bare legs below it, then back to her face. I'll make a note, she said. Iris stared at her for one full beat, then muttered, You're impossible, and went to sit at the island before her knees embarrassed her. Claire followed with toast, fruit, and the posture of a woman who apparently considered emotional upheaval a poor excuse to skip breakfast. The apartment was warm, quiet, and almost offensively domestic. That was the problem. No worse. That was exactly the problem. It was becoming easy. Not all of it. Not the families, not Daniel, not the fact that their marriage had technically begun as a tequila-soaked dare over a pool table. But this. The mornings. The coffee. Claire setting a plate down in front of her without asking whether she wanted one. Iris noticing which mug Claire reached for first and immediately hating that she noticed. Dangerous. All of it. Her phone buzzed across the counter. Then buzzed again. Then, before Iris could even pick it up, Claire's buzzed too. The two women looked at their screens at almost the same time, then at each other. Claire's expression went flat with recognition. Iris groaned. If this is another ex, I'm setting the city on fire. It's Dana. Iris looked at her own screen. June. Open at 5. One collector confirmed. One critic confirmed. Also, if Daniel comes back, I'm hitting him with a catalog. Iris closed her eyes. That one is June. Claire glanced from her own phone back to Iris. Dana says she's downstairs. What? Claire lifted a brow. She says, and I'm quoting, I did not witness a legally questionable wedding in 4-inch heels just to be excluded from the aftercare. Iris barked out a laugh before she could stop herself. Then immediately regretted that because Claire looked so pleased with herself it bordered on personal offense. The intercom buzzed. Of course it did. Claire went to answer it with the resigned calm of a woman who had known Dana for years and therefore had abandoned the concept of boundaries on her behalf. Come up, Claire said. Iris took another sip of coffee and said, I feel like I'm being audited by your social circle. Claire returned to the island. That's because you are. Great. Try to look innocent. I'm married to you. That ship sailed. Claire's mouth twitched just as the elevator doors opened down the hall and Dana entered the apartment carrying 2 pastry boxes, a garment bag, and the energy of someone who expected gossip as a constitutional right. She stopped exactly 3 steps in. Looked at Claire. Looked at Iris. Looked at the shirt. Looked at the expression on both their faces. Then inhaled slowly and said, Oh, this is much worse than I hoped. Iris, despite herself, liked Dana almost instantly. Maybe because Dana radiated the sort of confidence that belonged to women who had spent a long time in rooms full of rich men and survived by becoming funnier than all of them. She was elegant in a dark camel coat, sunglasses pushed up in her hair, lipstick perfect, expression wicked. Claire took the pastry boxes from her. "Good morning to you too." Dana ignored her and looked at Iris. "How are you?" Iris considered. Hungover in spirit. Threatened by furniture. Emotionally inconvenienced. Dana nodded once. "Excellent. You'll do." Claire set the pastries down. "Thank you for bringing chaos before noon." Dana took off her coat and draped it over a chair like she owned partial rights to the place. "You're welcome. Also, for the record, I am not here only for entertainment." Iris looked at her over the edge of her mug. "Only," Dana pointed at her. "Sharp. I see why Claire is insufferably interested." Claire reached for a pastry, and Dana slapped her hand away without looking. Iris watched that with immense satisfaction. Dana opened the garment bag and revealed a navy dress inside. Claire made a face. "No." Dana looked up. "It's not for you. I assumed that. You should stop doing that. It's become a character flaw." Dana turned to Iris. "This is for tonight if you don't already have something picked." Iris blinked. "Tonight?" Claire looked at Dana sharply. "What are you talking about?" Dana stared at both of them with the kind of long-suffering patience usually associated with saints and women who had once organized benefit dinners for people with trust funds and emotional deficiencies. "Your mother," she said, "is doing what she does best." Claire's expression cooled. Meaning she made 3 calls this morning pretending to be composed and therefore alarming half the city. Dana leaned one hip against the counter. "Which would be annoying but containable, except that people already know about the marriage and someone from the museum board has now decided tonight's Quinn Gallery preview will be an interesting place to observe the fallout." Iris stared. "My gallery?" Dana pointed at her. "Exactly. Small room. Good lighting. Emerging artists. Public enough to matter. Private enough to smell blood." Claire's eyes sharpened. "Who told them?" Dana's smile was thin. "Please. You don't need a leak in this city. You need one receptionist with a cousin and an opinion." Iris dropped her forehead lightly to the countertop. "I cannot believe my life." Dana looked at Claire. "You can cancel the preview. But if you do, it reads like fracture. If you don't, you'll have spectators." Claire was already thinking. Iris hated how visible that was now. The slight shift in her posture. The way she went still when rearranging an entire situation in her head. "I'm not canceling," Iris said before Claire could speak. Both women looked at her. Iris sat up and lifted her head. "I'm not canceling. June will kill me. The artist will kill me. And frankly, I refuse to let your mother and a room full of board donors decide whether I open my own doors." Claire's gaze warmed instantly. That was almost more distracting than if she'd argued. Dana, meanwhile, looked delighted. "Good. There she is. And if people come to stare," Iris said, "they can stare while buying art." Dana smiled like a proud and morally compromised aunt. "Now you sound married." Claire leaned one hand on the island and said very calmly, "Then we go. Together." Iris turned to her. "You say that like there was another option." There wasn't. Dana stole Claire's untouched pastry and finally sat down. "Excellent. Now that we've established the evening battlefield, there's another complication." Iris closed her eyes. "I'm begging you not to say ex-boyfriend. It's not the ex-boyfriend. See? We're improving already." Dana ignored that. "Your mother invited herself." Claire's expression changed by 1 exact degree. "Not enough for most people. Plenty for Iris." Dana continued. "And your father will probably come because he enjoys pretending he's only there to observe structural weaknesses in other people's arguments." That got a laugh out of Claire, reluctant and brief. Iris looked between them. "I hate how specific that sounds." "It's generational," Claire said. Dana took a sip of Claire's water, which felt like a dominance display. "Also," she said, looking at Iris now, "I called June on the way up." Iris blinked. "You did what?" Dana looked unbothered. "I like your employee." "Of course you do. She has the soul of a very competent arsonist." Iris sighed. "That's fair." Dana nodded. "Anyway, the critic is still coming." The collector from the West Village is still coming. One museum liaison is coming purely to gossip. I'll neutralize her. Claire tilted her head. How? Dana looked offended. Please. With eye contact in class. Iris laughed again. And if you like your love stories sharp, expensive, funny, and full of women who treat social warfare like a side hobby, subscribe now. Because by 5 o'clock, Quinn Gallery was going to be part art preview, part family standoff, and no one in the room was going to leave unchanged. By 1:30, the apartment had become less a place to live and more a preparation zone for a battle no one was officially calling a battle. Claire took 2 calls in the office and ended both within minutes. Dana stayed for lunch, somehow took over Iris's side of the island as if she had been there all year, and collected details with shameless precision. So, Dana said at one point, tearing a pastry in half. How bad was Daniel's posture? Iris, seated at the counter in a black silk blouse and dark slacks now, looked up from her tea. Offensive. Thought so. Claire, standing by the espresso machine, said mildly. That's what she said before we went in. Dana turned to Claire. And you grabbed his wrist? Claire glanced back at her. He reached for my wife. There was a very small pause. Dana did not react dramatically, which somehow made it more devastating. She simply looked at Claire for a second, then said, Oh, that's serious. Iris felt heat creep up her neck. Claire, to make it worse, looked at Iris right after saying it. Not challenging. Not teasing. Just steady. Dana saw that too and immediately grinned. Well, good luck to all of us. By 3, June texted again. June, your mother is here. Iris looked at the message and swore softly. Claire looked up from fastening her watch. Which mother? That is a horrifying question to have to sort by category. Dana reached for her handbag. I'm coming. Iris pointed at her. No. Dana stood anyway. Yes. You are not attending my family drama in advance of the main event. Counterpoint. I absolutely am. Claire adjusted her cuff and said, Let her come. Iris looked at her. Why are you encouraging this? Claire picked up her keys. Because if your mother is already at the gallery, it means the day has accelerated. Dana smiled brightly. Exactly. We must meet the acceleration well-dressed. Iris's mother, as it turned out, was not alone. Her father stood beside her near the rear wall of the gallery, hands in his coat pockets, looking like a man who had entered an art space prepared to mistrust every object in it. Her mother stood straighter, eyes too bright, concern and frustration fighting for control on her face. June lingered behind the desk with the expression of a woman watching weather form over open water. When Iris, Claire, and Dana entered, the bell chimed and all 4 heads turned. Her mother's gaze landed first on Iris, then on Claire. Then, because apparently the day did indeed hate moderation, on Dana. There was a split second where her face suggested she thought Iris had joined a particularly chic conspiracy. Iris walked forward first. Not aggressively, but not apologetically either. Hi, Mom. Her mother exhaled. Iris. Her father nodded once. We came before the preview. That explains the timing. Her mother ignored the line and looked at Claire. You're Claire. Claire stepped forward with measured calm and extended her hand. Mrs. Quinn. Mr. Quinn. Iris's father took the hand after a beat. Her mother looked at it, then accepted too. Dana, to her credit, said absolutely nothing and instead wandered toward a sculpture near the front window with the air of a woman who was definitely not listening and therefore hearing every word. Her mother looked at Iris again. We need to talk. We are talking. I mean properly. Claire's mouth moved very slightly at that. Iris saw it and almost smiled. My family says that too, Claire said. Her mother gave her a brief look that suggested she was not yet sure whether Claire Donovan was a problem, a shock, or a tax category. Then her father stepped in with the weary directness Iris had inherited from him more than she liked. Daniel called. Iris shut her eyes for 1 second. Of course he did. Her mother folded her arms. He was humiliated. Good. Iris. No, let's be accurate for once. He walked into my gallery because you asked him to. Her mother looked startled enough to qualify as honesty. We asked him to check on you. Because I got married to a woman? Because you got married overnight, her mother shot back. To anyone. The room went quiet. Iris could feel Claire beside her, not touching, but present enough to matter. Her father looked at the paintings rather than any of them and said, "This is fast." "Yes," Iris said. "It looks unstable." "Also yes." Her mother's voice softened then, which was somehow worse because it came from fear instead of judgment. "Iris, we just want you safe." That landed harder than the rest. Because unlike Daniel, unlike most of the assumptions circling her lately, her mother meant it. Maybe clumsily. Maybe unfairly. Maybe through a lens too narrow for the life Iris actually wanted. But she meant it. Iris looked at her for a long second. Then said, "Quieter now. Safe isn't always the same as alive, Mom." Her mother's eyes flickered. Her father looked up. Claire looked at Iris with that particular expression she wore when she wasn't interrupting because she knew the sentence belonged to someone else. Iris went on, because the truth had already opened and there was no point pretending again. Daniel was safe. Predictable. Approved. He wanted a life that looked right from the outside. She swallowed once. "I know you thought that meant I'd be okay. But I wasn't." No one spoke. Even June had gone still behind the desk. Her mother looked at Claire again. "And this? This makes you alive." Claire answered before Iris could. "I hope I don't make her smaller," she said. The words were simple. The impact was not. Iris turned. Claire held her parents' gaze, not performing, not trying to win them with softness, just being exact in the way she could be when she chose honesty over charm. "I know this is abrupt," Claire said, "and I know you don't know me. But I am not asking your daughter to become more convenient for anyone. Not for me. Not for my family. Not for a room full of people tonight." Iris's mother studied her. Her father did too. And what changed was not acceptance. Not yet. Just the first crack in certainty. Her father finally said, "That's more than Daniel ever said." Her mother shot him a look, but it was too late. The sentence was out. Iris stared at her father. He lifted one shoulder. "I'm not dead. I notice things." That absurdly nearly made her laugh. Her mother looked tired all of a sudden. "I don't know what to do with this." Claire answered with more gentleness than Iris had expected. "You don't have to do anything today," she said. "Just don't let someone else tell you who your daughter is while she's standing in front of you." Silence again. Then June, from behind the desk and very much without permission, said, "That was annoyingly good." Everyone turned. June smiled weakly. "Sorry. It was." Dana, from the sculpture, lifted one finger in the air without looking over. "Seconded." Iris almost choked on her own breath. Her mother closed her eyes for a second, perhaps deciding the entire city had become unusable. Then she looked back at Iris. "I am still angry," she said. "Okay." "And confused." "Also okay." "And I would still have preferred not to hear about my daughter's marriage after a man I no longer even like called me from outside her gallery." Iris blinked. "You don't like him anymore?" Her mother's face sharpened. "He called me from outside your gallery, Iris. I may worry, but I'm not an idiot." That time Iris really did laugh. So did her father once, under his breath. Her mother looked irritated by all of them, which meant the conversation had at least rejoined the living. Her father glanced toward the window, toward the gathering city outside. "We'll stay for the preview." Her mother turned. "Will we?" He gave a small nod. "We should see the thing before we condemn it." Iris stared at him. "Are you talking about the gallery or my marriage?" "Yes," he said. Dana laughed openly at that point, and even Claire's mouth softened. By 5:30 the gallery was full. Not packed. Worse. Curated. A collector in severe glasses. A critic with a soft scarf and a ruthless expression. Two young artists orbiting near the wine and pretending not to be terrified. A museum liaison who smiled too much. Dana moving through the room like a diplomat disguised as a beautiful woman with excellent earrings. June at the desk running the front with military efficiency and occasionally throwing Iris looks that translated roughly to "If anyone causes a scene, I will personally sell tickets." Claire stayed near Iris without shadowing her. That mattered. It would have been easy for her to dominate the room, easy for her name alone to shift all the gravity. Instead, she did something much more dangerous. She let Iris own it. She spoke when spoken to. She listened when Iris spoke to artists. She asked questions about the work that made it obvious she was actually looking. She shook hands without making the night about herself. Dana, meanwhile, deployed charm like a precision instrument. At one point, Iris overheard her saying to the museum liaison, "Honestly, if people insist on gossip, they could at least buy something while doing it." The liaison laughed a little too hard and drifted toward a painting with new purpose. Claire's mother arrived at 6:10 wearing dark silk and composure sharp enough to cut glass. Her father came with her. No announcement. No dramatic entrance. But the room felt them. Of course it did. Iris watched Claire notice them across the crowd. Watched the brief alignment of tension in her shoulders. Then watched it vanish as Claire moved toward them with all the grace of a woman who would not be ambushed on someone else's floor. Iris kept speaking to the critic while tracking half the gallery through peripheral vision. Dangerous skill. Necessary skill. The critic, to his credit, seemed more interested in the art than the scandal. "The curation is tight," he said, nodding toward the wall arrangement. "Thank you," Iris said. He studied her for a moment, eyes flicking briefly to the ring, then back to the art. Good evening for visibility. There it was. Not rude. Not innocent either. Iris smiled faintly. That depends what one wants visible. The critic's mouth moved, perhaps in approval. Fair answer. Across the room, Claire's mother was speaking to Dana. Dana looked delighted. Claire looked resigned. That was almost enough to be entertaining. Then one of the younger artists asked Iris a question about placement, and the next 10 minutes became what the night had been supposed to be all along: work. Real work. Lighting angles. Collector interest. Whether one piece should hang half an inch higher next time. Which conversation clusters had potential, and which were purely decorative. June passing her quietly and murmuring, "If the museum woman asks one more leading question, I'm charging her rent." Iris almost smiled. Then Claire appeared at her side with a glass of water and no comment, and that small gesture hit with absurd force because it was so specifically Claire, not interrupting, not fussing, just correctly noticing. "Thanks," Iris said. Claire looked at her. "You're doing well." That sounds clinical. It's admiration with structure. Iris laughed softly. "There you are." Claire's gaze dropped to her mouth for a beat too long. "I was never far." And if you like stories where a fake marriage survives exactly because the world keeps trying to expose it, subscribe now, because the gallery wasn't just holding tonight. It was proving something. And so were Claire and Iris. The first sale happened at 6:42. Not to Claire. Not to Dana. To the collector in the severe glasses, who bought a medium-sized mixed media piece after 20 minutes of serious looking and one short conversation with Iris that had nothing to do with her marital status and everything to do with texture, discipline, and emotional tension. June almost levitated. Dana appeared at Iris's elbow 3 minutes later and murmured, "That should irritate at least 4 people. Good." Claire, overhearing as she passed, said, "Excellent." Iris turned to watch her walk away and nearly forgot the sentence she'd been about to say to a sculptor. Her mother noticed that. So did Dana. Both women looked thoughtful in very different ways. Later, near the back wall, Claire's father stood in front of one large, abstract piece with his hands behind his back and the expression of a man trying not to admit he liked something he could not explain. Iris's father, beside him, frowned at the painting as if it had personally inconvenienced logic. Iris, coming up behind them, heard her father say, "I don't understand it." Claire's father replied, "That has never stopped money." Iris actually laughed out loud. Both men turned. Neither looked embarrassed. Her father pointed at the painting. "Did you choose this?" "Yes." He nodded once. "It's strong." That, from him, was close to a sonnet. "Thank you." Claire's father glanced toward the room where Claire stood speaking quietly to one of the artists. "She's watching the room." Iris looked too. "Claire?" He nodded. "She always does that," he said. "Finds the fault line first." Iris looked at him. "And does she usually stand on it?" The older man's expression changed, just barely. Something like reluctant amusement. "When she thinks something matters," he said. That answer stayed with Iris. A little later, the museum liaison finally made her move. She approached with a smile practiced enough to be a tax write-off and said to Iris, I hope the personal excitement hasn't distracted from the professional. June, 10 feet away, physically froze in offense. Dana, across the room, went still too. Claire turned before Iris could answer. But Iris got there first. She smiled brightly and said, "Actually, the art is still good even when women get married." The liaison blinked. Dana laughed into her wine. Claire's mother, standing beside Dana, let out the smallest involuntary sound that might once, in another life, have been the beginning of a real laugh. The liaison retreated not long after that. June looked like she wanted to frame the moment. By 8:30, the room had shifted. The gossip hadn't disappeared, but it had lost. Because the preview worked. The work held. People bought pieces. The critics stayed longer than expected. A museum assistant asked for a catalog. 2 young artists left looking less terrified than they arrived. Claire's parents were still there, which felt almost surreal. Iris's parents had drifted from anxious to observant. Dana had somehow charmed 3 separate women into speaking about art instead of scandal, which might have qualified as sorcery. At one point, Claire crossed to where Iris stood near the rear wall and said quietly, "Walk with me." Iris looked at her. "That sounds suspicious." "It's a gallery. Everything is suspicious." Still, Iris went. Claire led her not to the office, not to the back room, but toward the large central piece near the front where the light fell best. Dana noticed instantly. June did too. The 2 of them exchanged a look of such vulgar interest, it could have powered the block. Claire stopped beside the piece and turned, not just to Iris, but slightly outward, to the room. That was when Iris understood. Not because Claire was dramatic. Because she wasn't. Claire simply looked at the nearest cluster of people, then at the artist beside them, then back at Iris, and said in a voice calm enough to carry, "My wife has impeccable taste. If she says this is the strongest piece in the room, I suggest listening." Silence rolled outward in a soft circle. The artist stared. June nearly passed away where she stood. Dana looked like Christmas had come early. Iris looked at Claire and forgot, for one dangerous second, that there were other people in the room at all. Because Claire had said it so cleanly. No irony. No hedging. No self-consciousness. My wife. Not like a performance. Like a fact. The artist found her voice first. "Thank you." Claire inclined her head once. "You're welcome." Then she looked at Iris. And there it was. The real audience. The only one that mattered. The collector in severe glasses said, "Well, now I feel underdressed for this marriage." The room laughed. Pressure broke. Conversation resumed. But softer now. Different. Claire's mother, standing with Dana near the wine table, watched her daughter for a long beat, then crossed the room to Iris with all the elegance of a woman who had never stumbled in public and never intended to begin. Iris held still. Her mother stopped in front of her and looked from her face to Claire's, then back again. "You handle a room well," she said. Coming from anyone else, it would have been a compliment. Coming from Claire Donovan's mother, it was a hand extended over difficult water. Iris answered accordingly. "So do you." The older woman's mouth changed, very slightly. Then she said, "I still think the speed of this is absurd." "Fair. And I am not promising immediate comfort." "Also fair." A pause. Then quieter, "But I misjudged one thing." Iris waited. Her gaze moved briefly toward the artist Claire had just praised. Toward the sales desk. Toward the room still very much alive. "You are not ornamental," she said. Iris stared at her. Of all the things she had imagined hearing from this woman, that had not been one of them. "No," Iris said softly. "I'm not." The older woman gave one short nod. Then, with the precision of someone offering exactly as much as she could bear to offer today, she said, "Good," and walked away. Iris stood there for one stunned beat. Then 2. Then turned. Claire had seen the whole thing. Of course she had. Dana had too, and her expression suggested she needed champagne and a witness statement immediately. The preview ended just after 9. Slowly. Well, no explosions. No humiliations. No public disaster. Which, considering the ingredients, bordered on miracle. June locked the door after the last guest left and leaned against it like a woman returning from war. "I need a raise," she announced. You need sleep, Iris said. I need both. Dana, now gathering her coat, nodded solemnly. Correct. Claire's father said polite goodnight to Iris in a tone that was not warm yet but no longer purely evaluative. Iris's father hugged her awkwardly by the office door, which nearly broke her because her father had always hugged like a man apologizing to furniture. Her mother kissed her cheek, then looked at Claire and said, "Drive carefully." It was such an ordinary sentence that it felt enormous. Claire answered with equal care. "I will." Then they were gone. June looked between Claire and Iris. "Well," Dana laughed. "That really does summarize the evening." June pointed at both of them. "I want history to remember that I supported this marriage before several parents did." "History will be deeply moved," Iris said. June was unswayed. "Also, if either of you ever tries to pretend this is casual again, I'll become violent." Claire's mouth curved. "Noted." Dana fastened her coat and looked at Iris with bright, dangerous warmth. "For the record, I was curious after the wedding." Iris lifted a brow. "Only curious?" Dana smiled. "Fine." Skeptical. Amused. Prepared for implosion. She glanced at Claire. "But this? This is worse." Claire looked almost resigned. "Worse how?" Dana adjusted one earring. "You two are becoming sincere. It's very inconvenient for everyone who enjoys drama." June pressed both hands flat to the desk. "I still enjoy the drama." Dana nodded. "Naturally." Then she kissed Claire's cheek, surprised Iris by kissing hers too, and said, "Call me tomorrow. I deserve a debrief." "You deserve boundaries," Claire said. Dana laughed on her way out. And yet, June locked up behind her and turned with the expression of a woman holding herself together through sheer professionalism. "Go home," she told Iris. "Yes, ma'am." June narrowed her eyes. "Don't be cute." "I'm exhausted." Iris crossed to her and squeezed her shoulder once. "Thank you." June's face softened instantly. "Yeah, obviously." Then she looked at Claire. "Take care of her." Claire met her gaze with quiet seriousness. "I will." June nodded once like a guard accepting transfer of duty. "Good." Then she practically shoved them toward the door. Outside, the city was cooler, quieter, silver at the edges. Claire drove them home in a silence that felt earned. Not strained. Not crowded with unsaid things. Just full. Iris watched the streetlights pass across the windshield, then over Claire's face in brief intervals. "You were very sure of yourself in there." Claire kept one hand on the wheel. "When?" "When you called me your wife like you were introducing gravity." Claire glanced at her. "Should I have sounded uncertain?" Iris crossed one leg over the other. "No. It was just aggressive." Claire's mouth moved. "You liked it. That was the problem." "Maybe." Claire turned into the underground garage and parked. Then she shut off the car and turned fully toward Iris. The sudden quiet felt intimate in a way garages should never be allowed to feel. "You did well tonight," Claire said. Iris rolled her eyes lightly, again with the clinical admiration. Claire reached across the console and touched the edge of Iris's jaw with 2 fingers. This close, in the dim garage light, she looked less polished. More real. More tired. More dangerous for both reasons. "Then let me be less clinical," Claire said. Iris held still. Claire's thumb moved once. "You were brilliant," she said. "You kept your room. You kept yourself. You didn't let anyone make you perform gratitude or apology. And when my mother finally saw you, she saw someone she could not reduce." "I liked that very much." Heat moved low and warm through Iris. She looked down briefly, then back up. "You speak like a woman who enjoys fault lines." Claire's eyes softened. "Only the worthwhile ones." They went upstairs without saying much after that. The apartment was dark except for the lamp Claire switched on by the entry. Shoes came off. Jackets disappeared. Iris stood by the windows for a minute looking out at the city while Claire moved through the kitchen, poured water, then came to stand beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The glass reflected them back. Claire in charcoal, Iris in black silk, both a little tired, both altered in ways no one else could fully see. Finally Iris said, "I kept waiting for this to turn back into a dare." Claire looked at her reflection rather than her face. "And it didn't." "No." Iris took the glass Claire handed her. Their fingers brushed. Stayed. I thought maybe after your family lunch, Iris said, or after Daniel, or after tonight, I'd finally feel the joke again. The original stupidness of it. She gave a small, quiet laugh. But every time something pushed at us, it got more real instead. Claire was quiet. Not because she had nothing to say. Because she was listening with her whole face. Iris went on, voice lower now. And I don't know what to do with that. Claire turned then, one shoulder against the window, glass in hand. You don't have to do anything tonight. That sounds suspiciously kind. I'm versatile. Iris smiled despite herself. Then looked down at the water in her glass and said the thing that had been sitting under her ribs for hours. I don't want a piece of paper to be the reason you stay. The room went very still. Claire set her own glass down first. Then gently took Iris's from her hand and set that down too. Then she stepped closer. So close now that the city existed only in pale fragments around them. It isn't, Claire said. Iris looked up. Claire held her gaze. It stopped being that for me before we even got to the chapel, Claire said quietly. I thought you knew. Iris laughed once softly, mostly at herself. I was busy being drunk and reckless. You were also very sincere. Dangerous accusation. It's not an accusation. Claire lifted one hand and smoothed a loose curl back from Iris's face, then added, and I don't want a contract keeping you here either. That landed hard. Because of course. Because she would say exactly the right thing in exactly the voice that made defense impossible. Iris swallowed. It isn't. Claire's expression changed. Tiny shift. Huge impact. No. No, Iris looked at her and decided abruptly that she was too tired to hide properly. What's keeping me here is that when things get difficult, you're still where I look first. Claire's breath caught. Barely. Enough. Iris felt the truth of the sentence only fully after saying it. And once it was out, there was no taking it back. Good. Claire stepped even closer until there was no space left to pretend in. What are you saying? She asked softly. Iris looked at her for one long second. Then said, I'm saying I don't want this to be a one-year countdown. Nothing moved. Not the air. Not the city beyond the glass. Not either of them. Then Claire reached up, cupped Iris's face in both hands, and asked in a voice so low it almost disappeared, What do you want it to be? Iris's hands found Claire's wrists. Warm. Steady. Real. A marriage, she said. Claire closed her eyes for one brief beat. When she opened them again, there was nothing guarded left in them at all. Just relief. Wonder. And something so openly felt that Iris's chest ached with it. Good, Claire whispered. Iris laughed softly through the sting suddenly rising behind her eyes. There it is again. What? That word. Claire smiled. The real one. The one with no armor in it. Then let me be clearer. She leaned in, forehead resting lightly against Iris's, and said, without drama, without a grand speech, without anything except the truth of it. I'm choosing you sober, Iris. That nearly undid her. Entirely. Iris let out a shaky breath and closed the last inch between them, just to feel the steadiness of Claire there. I know, she whispered. Then, because she had learned absolutely nothing useful from this marriage, except that honesty was often more dangerous than flirting, she added. I'm choosing you too. Claire kissed her. Not like an argument. Not like jealousy. Not like the reckless chapel kiss after pool and tequila and diamonds. This one was slower. Fuller. A kiss that belonged to the end of something and the beginning of something else. When it broke, neither moved far. Claire's hands stayed on her face. Iris's fingers stayed curled around Claire's wrists. The city glowed behind them. The apartment was quiet. The whole impossible path that had brought them here, pool table, contract, families, ex-boyfriends, gallery walls, public rooms, private mornings, felt suddenly less like chaos and more like a map drawn backward. Claire touched her cheek once. So, she said softly. So Iris answered. Do we need to draft a new contract? Iris stared at her for one beat, then laughed into her shoulder. There she is, Claire murmured. Iris pulled back enough to look at her. Absolutely not. No more legal romance. Shame. You are deeply unwell. And yet, Iris smiled. Yes. And yet, Claire took her hand, led her toward the bedroom. No urgency now. No fire to outrun. No point to prove. Just the quiet ease of two women who had finally stopped pretending the world would decide for them. At the doorway, Iris paused and looked back once at the city, then at the apartment, at the cleared-out closet space, at the life that had stopped feeling borrowed at some point tonight. Claire noticed that too, of course. You all right? Iris looked at her, then said the simplest thing in the world. Yes. And this time she meant it without defense, without irony, without one hand already on the exit. Claire's smile softened. She tugged her gently closer. Claire kissed her again, and this time the tenderness of it only made the heat worse. There was no fight left between them now, no jealousy to outrun, no sharp edge to blame for the way their bodies kept finding each other. Just choice. Just the slow, almost disbelieving intimacy of two women who had finally stopped pretending this was temporary. Iris felt it in the way Claire's hands moved from her face to her waist, then lower along her back, drawing her in with quiet certainty. Claire kissed her like she had all the time in the world, and somehow that was far more devastating than urgency had ever been. Iris smiled against her mouth once, soft and shaky, and Claire answered it with a kiss at the corner of her lips, then along her jaw, then the side of her neck, lingering just enough to make Iris's breath catch. Claire, she whispered, half warning, half surrender, but Claire only looked at her with that calm, intent gaze that had undone her from the beginning. Iris slid her hands up into her hair, holding her there, feeling the warmth of her, the steadiness of her, the fact that none of this was a dare anymore. When Claire kissed her again, slower, deeper, Iris melted into it without thinking, letting herself be guided the rest of the way into the bedroom, as if there had never been any other place she was meant to end this night. They sank onto the bed in a quiet tangle of loosened clothes, warm skin, low laughter, and kisses that seemed to stretch the whole room softer around them. Claire's mouth traced a slow path from Iris's lips to her throat, her collarbone, then back again, unhurried, as if memorizing rather than rushing. Iris held on to her shoulders, then her waist, then simply held on, because that was what this felt like now, not falling, not losing control, but choosing not to let go. Every touch between them felt fuller for being wanted in the clear light of everything they had already survived. At some point the city beyond the windows disappeared completely, blurred into nothing but distant light. The room quieted to their breathing, the rustle of sheets, the occasional soft sound neither of them bothered to hide. Claire drew Iris close again and again, with that same unbearable mixture of restraint and certainty, until even Iris's smile had gone dazed and lazy at the edges. When they finally slowed, it wasn't from distance or doubt, but from the simple fact that they had exhausted every last defense between them. Claire pressed one last lingering kiss just below Iris's ear, and Iris answered by curling into her, warm and boneless and entirely done pretending she wanted space. For a while they stayed awake only enough to feel each other there, Claire's arm around her waist, Iris's fingers drifting lazily through Claire's hair, both of them smiling in the dark without quite needing words. And when sleep finally came for them, it came gently, with Claire still holding her close and Iris tucked against her like the choice had already been made long before either of them had found the courage to say it out loud. And sometime later, with the city dim beyond the windows and the last of the noise finally gone from both their minds, Claire Donovan and Iris Quinn fell asleep in the same bed, under the same roof. Not because a contract had demanded it, not because a dare had started it, but because both of them had finally chosen, fully and awake, to stay. If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more.